My name is Haley Wilson, I'm 26 years old, and I'll never forget that December night. I was sitting at our polished mahogany dinner table, watching my parents beam at my siblings' accomplishments when my father's voice cut through the room like glass. "You're the most useless child we have." My mother nodded in agreement while my siblings shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I smiled through tears threatening to spill, feeling that familiar ache of never being enough. That moment changed everything. It was the day I decided to prove them wrong, though not in the way anyone expected. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should believe in you most. To understand why those words cut so deeply, you need to know about the Wilson family. My father, Jason Wilson, is one of Boston's most respected neurosurgeons. My mother, Karen Wilson, is a corporate attorney who's never lost a major case. Success isn't just expected in our family, it's the minimum requirement. My older brother Trevor is 30 and followed perfectly in Dad's footsteps. Harvard Medical School, surgical residency at Mayo Clinic, publications in medical journals before he was 28. He even married the daughter of another surgeon, creating the perfect medical dynasty. My sister Megan, 28, took after Mom. Law degree from Yale, clerked for a federal judge, and recently made junior partner at her prestigious firm. She's always been articulate, focused, driven, everything I supposedly wasn't. Then there was me. From early childhood, I gravitated toward colors, shapes, and beauty. While Trevor dissected frogs and Megan debated on the middle school team, I was sketching landscapes and experimenting with watercolors. This difference might have been celebrated in another household, but in the Wilson family, it was treated as a concerning deficiency. I still remember my first major art competition win at 12. I spent weeks perfecting my entry, a mixed media piece about environmental conservation. When I won first place, my art teacher called my parents personally to invite them to the award ceremony. They sent our housekeeper Louisa instead, claiming a scheduling conflict. Later I discovered they'd attended Trevor's science club meeting that same evening, even though it was just a regular gathering, not a special event. When I was 16, my photography was selected for our high school's exhibition. I'd spent months on a series documenting elderly residents at a local nursing home, their weathered faces telling stories of lives fully lived. My parents did show up that time, but left after 15 minutes, my father checking his watch repeatedly while my mother scrolled through emails on her phone. "Nice pictures, Haley," Dad said as they rushed out. "Though you might consider doing something with more practical applications." The college decision was our biggest battle. They'd mapped out my path to Wharton or at least a business degree from Boston University. I wanted Rhode Island School of Design or Pratt. When my acceptance letter from RISD arrived along with a partial scholarship, my mother sighed deeply. "Art school is fine if you want a hobby, but you need something to fall back on." My father was more direct. "We're not paying for you to doodle for 4 years." I took out student loans, worked part-time jobs, and made it through anyway. Each holiday break brought the same questions. "When are you going to get serious? Have you thought about law school applications? Trevor was published in his second year of med school, you know." After graduation, the real world hit hard. While my classmates with family connections landed gallery representations or design firm positions, I struggled to find consistent work. Freelance illustration jobs barely covered ramen and rent for my shared apartment with 3 other artists. After 6 months of financial anxiety, I made the difficult decision to temporarily move back home while building my portfolio and applying for more stable creative positions. That choice, though practical, came with a steep emotional price. From the day I moved back into my childhood bedroom, I could feel my parents' disappointment like a physical presence. Mom would leave job listings for executive assistant positions on my bed. Dad would introduce me to his colleagues' children who were doing so well in consulting or finance. The day of that fateful dinner started normally enough. I had spent the morning applying for a graphic design position at a local advertising agency and the afternoon working on illustrations for my portfolio. I'd recently started getting small commissions through my Instagram account, nothing substantial, but promising leads. I was cautiously optimistic about sharing this development over dinner. Mom had prepared her traditional holiday roast with all the trimmings. The dining room sparkled with her collection of crystal and silver, perfection expected and delivered as always. I helped set the table, carefully placing each fork and knife according to her exacting standards. "Haley, the water spots on these glasses are unacceptable," she said, holding one up to the light. "If you're going to do something, do it properly." I rewashed and dried every glass, a small preview of the scrutiny to come. The Wilson family dinner began like a well-rehearsed play. Everyone knew their roles and lines, the familiar rhythms of our interactions polished over years of practice. Mom placed the roast at the center of the table with flourish. Her culinary crown jewel surrounded by roasted vegetables arranged by color. Dad uncorked an expensive bottle of Cabernet, letting it breathe while reciting facts about its vineyard and vintage. "Only the best for the family gathering," he announced, pouring generously into everyone's glass except mine, which received a measured half portion. "Haley, you should learn about wines. Culture is important in business settings." Trevor and his wife Allison arrived exactly on time, bringing an artisanal cheese board as their contribution. Megan came shortly after with her boyfriend Philip, a junior partner at a different law firm. The initial conversation floated on safe topics: the unseasonably cold weather, Trevor and Allison's recent vacation to Barbados, Megan's thoughts on a Supreme Court case. After the first course, Mom's butternut squash soup with cream fraiche, Dad initiated what he called the Wilson Achievement Round, a family tradition I had grown to dread. "Let's check in on everyone's progress," he said, folding his hands on the table. "Trevor, you first." My brother straightened in his chair, clearly prepared for this moment. "Well, I've been selected to assist on a groundbreaking clinical trial for neural regeneration techniques. Only 3 residents were chosen nationwide. And Dr. Brenner has asked me to co-author a paper for the New England Journal of Medicine." "Excellent." Dad beamed, raising his glass. "That's the Wilson standard." "We're also considering putting an offer on the Colonial in Brookline," Allison added, touching Trevor's hand affectionately. Mom nodded approvingly. "Perfect neighborhood for when you start a family." Next came Megan's update, delivered with her courtroom precision. The Harrison merger finally closed. I led the due diligence team, and the partners were impressed enough to put me in charge of the upcoming Fitzgerald acquisition. She paused for effect. "It's their biggest deal this quarter." "That's my girl," Dad said. "Following in your mother's footsteps." Philip chimed in, "Everyone at Megan's firm knows she's on the fast track to senior partner." The pride radiating from my parents was almost tangible. Then, inevitably, all eyes turned to me. I felt my shoulders tense and forced my expression to remain neutral. "And what about you, Haley?" Mom asked with the slight edge in her voice she reserved for discussions of my career. "Any progress with those little art projects of yours?" I took a breath and tried to infuse my voice with enthusiasm. "Actually, yes. I've been getting more freelance illustration work. A children's book author found my portfolio online and commissioned me for her next series. And I have interviews with 2 design firms next week." Dad cut his meat with surgical precision, not looking up. "Commissioned? What does that pay, exactly?" "For this project, about $3,000, I answered, knowing immediately it was a mistake to mention the amount. $3,000, he repeated flatly. Trevor's signing bonus out of residency was $150,000. "It's a start, Dad. Building a creative career takes time." "Time," Mom interjected, "which you seem to have plenty of while living in our house rent-free." "I'm contributing to expenses," I defended, feeling heat rise to my face. "And I'm actively interviewing for full-time positions." "Design firms," Dad scoffed. "Drawing logos for dog food companies or whatever it is they do. Creative direction is actually a respected professional." "Let me be clear," Dad interrupted, placing his knife and fork down with deliberate care. "Trevor is saving lives. Megan is handling billion-dollar legal matters. You're doodling." Almost 27 years old and nothing substantial to show for it. The table went silent. Even Trevor and Megan looked uncomfortable. I'm working hard to establish myself in a competitive field, I said quietly. That's when he said it, with the casual cruelty of someone stating an obvious fact, you're the most useless child we have. The words hung in the air. Mom nodded slightly in agreement. Trevor studied his plate intensely. Megan's boyfriend suddenly became very interested in his wine glass. Only Allison showed a flicker of sympathy, a brief look of shock crossing her face before she composed herself. I felt as though I'd been physically struck. The room seemed to tilt slightly, sounds becoming muffled as blood rushed in my ears. Years of accumulated criticisms had culminated in this direct assessment of my worth, or apparent lack thereof. May I be excused? I managed to ask, surprised at how steady my voice remained while everything inside me was collapsing. We haven't had dessert, Mom responded automatically. I'm not feeling well. I pushed my chair back, the scraping sound unnaturally loud. Always so sensitive, Dad muttered as I left the dining room. In my childhood bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, still perfectly maintained with the same lavender bedspread I'd had since high school. Photos of family vacations lined the bookshelf, smiling faces hiding the constant evaluations and comparisons. Awards from my youth, mostly academic, pushed by my parents, gathered dust in a corner. Tears came silently at first, then in heaving sobs I muffled with a pillow. Not because what he said was shocking, but because it confirmed what I'd always suspected they thought of me. I was the family disappointment. The failed experiment. The useless child. That night, I barely slept, replaying not just the dinner conversation but years of subtle and not-so-subtle messages about my inadequacy. By morning, something had hardened inside me, a seed of determination taking root where only hurt had existed before. The house was quiet when I emerged from my room the next morning. I could smell coffee from the kitchen but had no desire to face anyone after last night's humiliation. I crept down the back stairs, hoping to grab a quick cup and retreat before encountering my parents. As I approached the kitchen, I heard their voices and froze midway down the hallway. I worry about her, Mom was saying, her tone more exasperated than concerned. At her age, I was already made associate and carrying my own client list. She lacks direction, Dad replied. Always has. That art school was the worst decision, filled her head with unrealistic expectations. Trevor and Megan never needed this much guidance. They just knew what was expected and delivered. Maybe she needs to hit rock bottom before she'll listen to reason. Law school applications are still open for next fall. We should make it clear that our support has conditions. She needs to get a real job or commit to a proper graduate program. This artistic fantasy has gone on long enough. I backed away silently, a strange calm replacing the previous night's pain. They had made their position unmistakably clear, not just to my face but to each other. This wasn't a momentary frustration, it was their genuine assessment of me. I had a choice to make, either accept their narrative about my life or decisively reject it. By noon, I had packed 2 suitcases with essentials. I left most possessions behind, taking only clothes, my laptop, art supplies, and a few sentimental items. Mom found me as I was loading my car. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded, arms crossed. "I'm moving out," I replied simply. "Because of what your father said?" "You're proving his point by being this impulsive." "I'm not being impulsive. I'm being decisive." "There's a difference." Dad appeared in the doorway. "And where exactly are you going with no job and no money?" "I'll figure it out." He shook his head with the confidence of someone who believed he knew me better than I knew myself. "You'll be back within a month when reality sets in." "I don't think so, Dad." I closed the trunk. "When you're ready to get serious about your future, give us a call," he said, already turning back toward his home office. Mom at least had the decency to look slightly concerned. "You have your health insurance card? And enough medication for your allergies?" "Yes, Mom." "Well." she straightened her cashmere sweater. Sometimes a wake-up call is necessary. I drove away from their beautiful colonial house with no concrete plan except to not return on their terms. The apartment I found that day was barely larger than my childhood bedroom. Located above a noisy laundromat in a distinctly unglamorous part of the city, it featured suspicious water stains on the ceiling, windows that refused to close completely, and neighbors whose lives were conducted at maximum volume. The rent consumed nearly all my remaining savings, leaving just enough for ramen noodles and mac and cheese to last a couple of weeks. That first night was the loneliest of my life. Sitting on an air mattress, my only furniture, I surveyed my new kingdom of peeling paint and questionable carpet. No family photos adorned these walls. No gourmet dinner waited downstairs. Just the harsh fluorescent light buzzing overhead and the realization that I was utterly on my own. I spent that week applying for every job remotely connected to design or art, but also coffee shops, retail stores, anywhere that might provide income. Each night brought increasing anxiety as my bank balance dwindled. I developed a detailed spreadsheet tracking every penny, calculating exactly how many days I could survive before complete financial collapse. 2 weeks in, the rejections were piling up. Too qualified for service jobs, not experienced enough for design positions. My portfolio, which I'd been so proud of, seemed woefully inadequate against the competition. One night, after a particularly brutal rejection from a greeting card company, I sat on my air mattress staring at my phone, my father's number highlighted on the screen. One call. That's all it would take. One admission of failure, one apology for my attitude, and I could be back in my comfortable bedroom with a full refrigerator and heating that actually worked. The humiliation would be intense but brief. They would welcome the prodigal daughter with a mixture of smugness and relief, and life would continue as before, me playing the role of disappointing child seeking redemption through their approved channels. My thumb hovered over the call button as tears slid down my face. This was rock bottom, not just financially broke but spiritually broken, ready to surrender my dreams for basic comfort and family approval. Then my phone buzzed with a text message, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. The sender was Amanda, a former classmate from art school I hadn't spoken to in months. Hey Haley. Long time no talk. Are you still in Boston? There's an open call for artists for an exhibition at Grafton Street Gallery next month. Made me think of your work. Deadline for submissions is Friday. You should totally apply. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before responding with forced enthusiasm that yes, I was still in Boston, and yes, I would look into the opportunity. After getting the details, I researched the gallery, a respected space known for launching emerging artists. The exhibition theme was resilience in transition, focusing on works that explored personal transformation through adversity. It was past midnight, but I pulled out my sketchbook anyway. As the laundromat machines rumbled beneath my feet and sirens wailed in the distance, I began to draw. Not with the desperate hope of immediate success, but with the quiet determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I surveyed my apartment walls with new eyes. The water stains and peeling paint weren't just signs of my financial predicament, they could become my planning canvas. I purchased the cheapest rolls of butcher paper I could find, taping them across the largest wall to create a massive planning surface. In the center, I wrote proving them wrong in bold letters, then immediately crossed it out. This wasn't about them anymore. Instead, I wrote proving myself right. I divided the paper into sections: artistic development, business of art, financial survival, and network building. Each area needed attention if I was going to transform from struggling artist to sustainable creative professional. The wall became my visual roadmap, growing more detailed with each passing day. First, I researched successful artists working in similar styles and mediums. I studied their career trajectories, noting that virtually none had overnight success. Most had balanced commercial work with personal artistic development for years before achieving recognition. This research revealed an uncomfortable truth: I had been naively romantic about an artist's path, imagining talent alone would open doors. My portfolio, which I had thought was diverse, actually showcased a scattered approach without a cohesive style or voice. I needed focus and depth rather than breadth. I dedicated morning hours to developing a distinctive aesthetic that combined my illustrative skills with conceptual strength. The Business of Art section forced me to acknowledge my complete ignorance about the professional side of creativity. I hadn't taken these courses seriously in school, assuming they didn't apply to real artists. Now I realized this thinking had sabotaged me. I found free online resources about pricing work, contracts, copyright, licensing, and marketing. I created spreadsheets to track submission opportunities, application deadlines, and potential income sources. Taking inventory of my skills revealed marketable abilities beyond just drawing and painting. I could write compelling proposals. I had strong organizational instincts. My experience working service jobs through college had taught me how to communicate professionally. These weren't separate from my artistic identity but integral parts of a creative professional's toolkit. The financial survival section was most urgent. With less than 2 weeks of ramen noodles remaining in my budget, I needed income immediately. I researched every gallery, museum, art supply store, and frame shop within walking distance, creating a targeted list for in-person applications. On day 3 of my plan, I walked into the Newberry Street Gallery wearing my only professional outfit and asked to speak with the manager. "We're not hiring," the receptionist said without looking up from her computer. "I understand," I replied, remaining in place. "But I'd still appreciate 5 minutes with Ms. Baxter if she's available. I'm a RISD graduate specializing in mixed media and illustration with experience in customer service and event coordination." Something in my prepared speech or desperate determination must have registered, because minutes later I was sitting across from Diane Baxter, the gallery's director. I was honest about my situation, recently graduated, building my career, needing stable income while developing my art practice. I showed her my organizational systems on my phone and explained how I could apply those skills to gallery operations. "We really aren't hiring," she said after reviewing my resume. "But I do need someone to help coordinate our upcoming exhibition schedule and manage our online presence. It would be part-time, 20 hours a week." The pay was minimal, but it would cover rent and basic necessities. More importantly, it placed me directly in the art world, surrounded by working professionals and collectors. I started the following Monday. With survival temporarily secured, I dedicated every non-working hour to artistic development. My tiny apartment became a studio, with projects hanging from every available surface. I worked nights and weekends, developing the cohesive style I had identified as my weakness. I focused on mixed media illustrations exploring themes of belonging, identity, and resilience, directly processing my own experience through my work. Creating a professional website seemed financially impossible until I discovered trade opportunities. I found a web developer who needed illustrations for his personal project and arranged to exchange services. My portfolio site took shape, showcasing not just finished pieces but my process and inspirations. Cold emailing established artists was terrifying but necessary. I crafted personalized messages to 20 artists whose careers I admired, asking specific questions about their development and offering to assist with projects in exchange for guidance. 18 never replied. 1 sent a form response. But one, Grace Bennett, an established mixed media artist, responded personally. "Your email stood out because you asked thoughtful questions rather than making demands," she wrote. "I see potential in your work, though it needs development. If you're serious about assistance, I need help cataloging my archives for an upcoming retrospective." For the next 2 months, I spent Sundays in Grace's studio, organizing decades of work while absorbing her wisdom about artistic development and career sustainability. She was brutally honest about my portfolio. Technically proficient but lacking emotional courage, while providing specific direction for improvement. "You're holding back the rawness," she observed, reviewing my latest pieces. "Art that moves people comes from the places that scare you." Financial management became a masterclass in extreme budgeting. I tracked every expense in a detailed spreadsheet, identifying patterns and eliminating anything non-essential. My food budget was $25 weekly, meaning careful meal planning and no eating out. I found a free community yoga class for my mental health and ran in the public park for physical exercise. Every supply purchase was carefully considered for maximum utility. After 3 months of gallery work, I received my first real commission through a connection I'd made during an exhibition opening. A local coffee shop owner needed illustrations for their seasonal promotional materials, nothing prestigious, but legitimate paid work in my field. The $400 fee barely covered that month's utilities and groceries, but represented a critical first step. I launched my professional Instagram account with a strategic approach. Rather than posting randomly, I researched optimal times and content strategies. Every caption was crafted to build narrative around my developing body of work. Growth was glacially slow, sometimes gaining only 2 or 3 followers daily, but I maintained consistent quality and engagement. The rejection letters accumulated in a dedicated folder on my desktop. Gallery submissions, residency applications, job inquiries, each no represented effort and hope. Some days, the rejections overwhelmed my determination. During one particularly dark week after 6 consecutive rejections, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by half-finished work, questioning every decision that had led me here. My phone pinged with a message from Grace: "Rejection is the universe's way of redirecting you. Keep going." 6 months after leaving my parents' house, I had established the beginnings of a sustainable framework: part-time gallery work, occasional commissions, developing portfolio, growing network, and emerging artistic voice. I was exhausted, often working 16-hour days between the gallery and my studio practice. My bank account remained perpetually near zero, with no room for emergencies or luxuries. But something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time, I was building a life entirely of my own design, measuring success by my standards rather than external validation. The foundation was fragile, but it was mine. Nearly 7 months into my independent life, I was hanging a new exhibition at the gallery when my phone chimed with an Instagram notification. Someone named Marcus Wright had sent a direct message. "Saw your work on your feed. I own Blackbird Coffee on Cambridge Street. Looking for an artist to create a mural for our main wall. Your style would be perfect. Paid commission if interested." I nearly dropped the valuable photograph I was handling. Blackbird was one of the most popular independent coffee houses in the city, known for featuring local artists and hosting community events. A mural there would be seen by hundreds of people daily. After confirming the opportunity was legitimate, I met with Marcus to discuss his vision. He wanted something that captured the spirit of the cafe, a community gathering place that connected diverse people through coffee culture. The wall was massive, 15 feet wide by 10 feet high, and prominently visible from every angle of the main space. "We can offer $3,000 for the completed work," he said. "We need it finished within 3 weeks for our anniversary celebration." The timeline was brutal considering I still worked at the gallery, but the exposure opportunity was too valuable to decline. I negotiated for $3,500 plus supplies and signed a proper contract, thanks to my business research. The next 3 weeks became a blur of exhaustion. I worked morning shifts at the gallery, painted at Blackbird from afternoon until closing, then returned to my apartment to continue developing designs and prepare for the next day. I survived on coffee and protein bars, averaging 4 hours of sleep nightly. My hands developed calluses from holding brushes for so many consecutive hours. The mural concept evolved into a vibrant tableau showing diverse people connecting through shared moments, conversations, creative collaboration, quiet contemplation, all linked by intricate patterns representing coffee's journey from farm to cup. I incorporated subtle storytelling elements throughout, rewarding viewers who took time to discover the details. On the final day before the unveiling, I worked 20 straight hours to complete the piece, adding the last highlights as morning light filtered through the cafe windows. Marcus brought me a freshly brewed cup from their special reserve. "This exceeds everything I imagined," he said, studying the finished work. "You've captured exactly what Blackbird means to this community." The anniversary celebration that weekend drew a significant crowd. I stood nervously in a corner, watching people's reactions as they encountered the mural. Phones emerged to take photos, with many visitors posing in front of different sections. I overheard snippets of conversation about the imagery and techniques. What I didn't expect was for someone to recognize me as the artist. A young woman approached, phone in hand, showing my Instagram profile. "Are you Haley Wilson? Did you create this?" When I nodded, she asked if she could take a photo with me in front of the work. That photo, shared on her popular local blog, became the catalyst for unexpected attention. By Monday morning, my Instagram followers had jumped from a few hundred to nearly 3,000. My inbox contained messages from other business owners interested in commissioned work and a request for an interview from an arts and culture blog. The interview, published the following week under the headline "Rising Artist Transforms Blackbird Cafe with Stunning Community-Centered Mural." The writer highlighted my educational background and approached the piece with thoughtful critique, analyzing both technique and conceptual elements. Reading a professional assessment of my work, taken seriously as art rather than dismissed as decoration, validated years of struggle. Commission requests increased to the point where I needed to establish a waiting list. I created a detailed pricing structure based on size, complexity, and commercial usage, no longer accepting payments that undervalued my time. For the first time, I could be selective about projects, choosing opportunities that aligned with my developing artistic voice. 2 months after the mural unveiling, with my financial situation stabilized through consistent commission work, I received an email that changed everything. The curator of Grafton Street Gallery, where I had submitted work for that exhibition Amanda told me about months earlier but had been rejected, reached out directly. "I saw your mural at Blackbird and recognized your submission from our Resilience show. While it wasn't right for that exhibition, your work has clearly evolved substantially since then. We're planning a group show focused on emerging local artists, and I believe your current direction would fit perfectly. Would you be interested in submitting new work for consideration?" Preparing for this opportunity consumed every spare moment. I created a series of mixed media pieces expanding on themes from the mural but with more personal vulnerability, directly incorporating elements of my family experience without being explicitly autobiographical. The work expressed the tension between external expectations and authentic identity, polished surfaces disrupted by raw emotional undercurrents. The night before the submission deadline, I questioned everything. The pieces felt too personal, too revealing. I almost substituted safer, more commercially appealing works. Grace's words echoed in my mind: "Art that moves people comes from the places that scare you." I submitted the original series. 2 weeks later, I received confirmation that all 5 pieces had been accepted for the exhibition. Additionally, the gallery wanted to feature my artist statement and photo prominently in their promotional materials, identifying me as a highlight of the Emerging Artists Showcase. Preparing for my first legitimate gallery exhibition triggered intense imposter syndrome. What if viewers saw through me? What if the other artists, with their established practices and credentials, recognized me as the amateur I still felt like? What if no one connected with the work? On opening night, I arrived early to see my pieces professionally installed under perfect lighting. Seeing my name on the wall plaque, "Haley Wilson, Mixed Media Series, Expectations," nearly brought me to tears. "First exhibition?" asked an older artist setting up nearby. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because you keep looking at your work like you can't believe it's here," she smiled. I felt the same at my first show 20 years ago. The feeling never completely goes away, which is probably good for our creative development. I expected friends from the art community to attend, but was unprepared for the actual turnout. Amanda came with several former classmates. Diane and colleagues from the gallery arrived to show support. Marcus from Blackbird brought his staff. Even Grace made an appearance, giving me a rare public compliment on my artistic growth. As the evening progressed, I noticed a distinguished older man spending considerable time with each of my pieces, making notes in a small leather notebook. The gallery director approached me with barely contained excitement. "That's Lawrence Harrington," she whispered. one of the most important collectors in New England. He specifically asked about you when he arrived. An hour later, red dots appeared next to 3 of my 5 pieces, indicating sales. The gallery director confirmed that Harrington had purchased 2 works, while another collector had acquired the third. The combined sales represented more money than I had earned in the previous 6 months combined. A local arts reporter covered the exhibition, featuring a photograph of my work and describing me as a significant emerging talent balancing technical precision with emotional authenticity. The article mentioned my RISD background and Blackbird mural, presenting a narrative of deliberate career development rather than the chaotic survival it had actually been. With financial pressure temporarily relieved through sales and commissions, I could approach my career with strategic intention rather than desperation. I expanded beyond immediate income generation to build longer-term professional foundations. I developed workshop curricula teaching mixed media techniques, providing both additional income and teaching credentials for my resume. Recognizing that many artists struggled with the business aspects I had been forced to master, I created an online course about artistic career development. The initial enrollment was small, but participants' positive feedback led to steady growth through referrals. This passive income stream provided crucial stability between larger projects. For the first time since leaving my parents' house, I had actual savings in my bank account. I moved to a better apartment with proper studio space and reliable heating. I could afford quality materials rather than the cheapest options. Most significantly, I could occasionally decline projects that didn't align with my artistic goals without financial panic, the truest measure of professional sustainability. 18 months after being called useless at the family dinner table, I had transformed from a dependent adult with little art projects to a working professional artist with gallery representation, commissioned murals, teaching credentials, and multiple income streams. The external validation was gratifying, but the internal sense of self-determination mattered more. I had built this life piece by piece, guided by my own vision rather than anyone else's expectations. Yet despite professional success, one piece remained unresolved. I had not spoken to my parents since leaving their house. Through mutual silence, we had created a chasm that widened with each achievement unremarked and each holiday unacknowledged. The final test of my transformation would require returning to where it began. The email from my mother arrived almost exactly 2 years after that devastating family dinner. The subject line read simply, "Article. Haley, we saw the piece about you in Boston Arts Monthly. Your father and I would like to have you for dinner this Sunday at 6 p.m. Please let us know if you can attend. Mom." No congratulations. No acknowledgement of the time passed without communication. Just a dinner invitation prompted by public recognition of my work. My first instinct was to ignore it entirely. I had created a fulfilling life without their approval or support. What purpose would reopening those wounds serve? I discussed the invitation with my therapist, whom I had been seeing since my financial situation stabilized enough to afford healthcare. "What do you hope to gain from accepting?" she asked. "Closure, maybe," I replied. "Or at least a chance to interact with them as the person I am now, not who they wanted me to be." "And what would a successful outcome look like to you?" "Not them admitting they were wrong," I said after consideration. "I don't expect that. Just recognition that my path is valid, even if it's not what they would have chosen." "Are you prepared for the possibility that they might not provide that?" This question lingered with me for days as I contemplated my response. Was I strong enough to face potential rejection again? The difference was that now rejection would hurt but not devastate me. My identity and worth were no longer contingent on their approval. I confirmed my attendance with a brief, polite email. The Sunday of the dinner, I prepared methodically. I chose an outfit that represented my professional identity, artistic but polished. I brought a bottle of wine selected with the same care my father would appreciate. I arrived exactly on time, neither eager nor reluctant, simply present. The house hadn't changed. Same manicured lawn. Same tasteful decor. Same family photos arranged to showcase achievements. I noticed my graduation photo had been updated to include my RISD commencement, though positioned less prominently than Trevor's medical school or Megan's law school ceremonies. Mom opened the door with a reserved smile. "Haley. You look, well. Thank you. So do you." The exchange of pleasantries felt like a script for strangers. Dad emerged from his study, greeting me with a firm handshake rather than a hug. "Your mother made pot roast." The meal proceeded with superficial conversation about weather, traffic, and neighborhood developments. Neither mentioned my career until dessert was served. So, Dad finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Quite an article about your artwork." "Yes, the exhibition was successful. 3 pieces sold opening night." "We always knew you had talent," Mom said, as though they had been supportive all along. "It was just a matter of applying yourself properly." "And that mural they mentioned," Dad continued. "Good exposure. Smart networking." I realized what was happening. They were recrafting the narrative, positioning my success as validation of their parenting, the tough love that had finally motivated their directionless daughter to apply herself properly. "You know," Dad said, refilling his wine glass, "sometimes parents have to be firm to help their children realize their potential. Looks like you finally figured things out." Something inside me went very still and clear. This was the crossroads: accept their revised version of events to maintain peace, or speak my truth regardless of consequences. "I didn't figure things out because of your disapproval," I said calmly. "I succeeded despite it." The room went silent. I built my career without connections, without financial support, and without encouragement from the people who should have been my biggest advocates. I worked multiple jobs, lived in an apartment with mold and broken windows, and ate ramen for months while developing my portfolio. "Now Haley," Mom began. "I'm not finished," I continued, my voice steady. 2 years ago, at this table, you called me your most useless child because I chose a path different from what you valued. You made it clear that unless I conformed to your definition of success, I would never be good enough." Dad's expression hardened. "We were concerned about your ability to support yourself. The arts aren't exactly known for financial stability. Yet here I am, supporting myself quite successfully. But that dinner wasn't about practical concern for my welfare. It was about control and conformity." "You're being dramatic," Mom said dismissively. "We always wanted what was best for you." "What you thought was best for me," I corrected. "There's a difference. And I'm not being dramatic by accurately recalling what was said. If you've come here to throw our past concerns in our faces now that you've had a bit of success," Dad began. "I came here hoping for reconciliation," I interrupted. "But reconciliation requires acknowledgement of harm. I don't need you to apologize for wanting me to be successful. I need you to recognize that your definition of success isn't the only valid one, and that your approach caused real damage." "Well," Mom said after an uncomfortable silence, "we're certainly proud of what you've accomplished, even if it wasn't the path we would have chosen." It wasn't the deep recognition I had hoped for, but perhaps it was all they were capable of offering. We finished dessert in strained silence. As I prepared to leave, Trevor called. Mom put him on speakerphone, clearly relieved by the interruption. After hearing I was there, he asked to speak with me privately before hanging up. He called my cell as I drove away from our parents' house. "How did it go?" he asked. "About as well as expected. They're proud of me now that others have validated my work." "For what it's worth, I should have said something that night," he admitted. "When Dad said what he did, I knew it was wrong." "Why didn't you?" "Cowardice, I guess. It's easier to stay in their good graces." This surprising vulnerability from my perpetually perfect brother shifted something in my perception of our family dynamics. "Are you happy, Trevor? Really happy with the path they laid out for you?" The pause before his answer told me everything. "I'm successful," he finally said. "That's what matters in the Wilson family." The following day, Megan texted asking to meet for coffee. Over lattes at a cafe, not Blackbird. This conversation needed neutral territory. My sister revealed her own complicated relationship with our parents' expectations. "I'm good at law, but I don't love it," she confessed. "Sometimes I wonder what I would have chosen without their influence." "It's not too late to explore other interests," I suggested. "Easy for you to say. You were always braver than me." She hesitated before adding, "I envied that about you." "Still do." These conversations with my siblings revealed that what I had perceived as a unified family front against my choices was more complex. They too carried burdens of expectation, just different from mine. I didn't expect my confrontation with my parents to magically heal our relationship. Real change would require ongoing effort from all sides. But I had established boundaries and spoken my truth. Whether they chose to reflect on their role or continue their narrative was beyond my control. What mattered was that I had returned on my terms, not as the prodigal daughter seeking forgiveness for disappointing them, but as an adult who had created success by her own definition. I had faced the source of my deepest wound without being diminished by it. That itself was a form of victory, regardless of their response. 1 year after that difficult family dinner, my life bears little resemblance to the existence I had before that fateful night when my father's words changed everything. My third solo exhibition recently closed after a successful 6-week run. My mural work has expanded to include public art commissions for the city. My online courses about creative business development have grown into a sustainable income stream that supports my more experimental artistic projects. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something we're all still navigating. We maintain contact through occasional dinners and holiday gatherings, though the intimacy of true understanding remains elusive. Mom makes efforts to ask about my exhibitions, though she rarely attends them. Dad has stopped making disparaging comments about art as a career, which represents progress of a sort. The most surprising development has been the transformation in my sibling relationships. Trevor has begun painting as a hobby, something he kept secret for years. Megan has reduced her law practice hours to explore writing, starting with legal articles but increasingly moving toward creative nonfiction. We meet monthly to discuss our creative pursuits, forming the supportive family unit we never had growing up. I've established clearer boundaries with my parents. I decline invitations that feel obligatory rather than genuine. I redirect conversations when they veer toward comparative achievement metrics. I leave when comments become toxic. These boundaries aren't punitive but protective, creating the conditions under which a healthier relationship might eventually grow. The community I've built around me has become my chosen family. Fellow artists who understand the creative struggle. Mentors who offer guidance without condescension. Friends who celebrate each achievement, no matter how small. Even some of my online course students have become part of my support network, creating connections I never anticipated. Perhaps the most meaningful development has been establishing the New Perspectives Foundation, a small nonprofit providing resources for young artists from unsupported backgrounds. Using a percentage of proceeds from my commercial work, we fund art supplies, portfolio development workshops, and mentorship for talented individuals whose families don't understand or support their creative paths. Witnessing their growth as they receive the encouragement I lacked has been profoundly healing. Looking back at my journey from useless child to purposeful adult, I recognize that my parents' judgment was never truly about my worth. Their assessment reflected their own limited perspective, their inability to value what fell outside their narrowly defined vision of success. Understanding this doesn't excuse their behavior but helps me contextualize it without internalizing it. Initially, proving them wrong provided powerful motivation. The desire to demonstrate my capability pushed me through countless obstacles and rejections. But as my career developed, I discovered that external validation, even the satisfaction of proving critics wrong, provides only temporary fulfillment. Lasting satisfaction comes from creating work that reflects authentic purpose, regardless of others' opinions. The real transformation wasn't becoming successful by conventional metrics, sales, exhibitions, press coverage. It was developing the inner security to define success on my own terms. To recognize that my value isn't determined by others' assessments. To create from a place of personal truth rather than reactive defiance. When I teach workshops for emerging artists, I emphasize that technical skill and business acumen are important, but resilience is essential. The ability to face rejection without being defined by it. To hear no without internalizing failure. To continue creating when external validation is absent. These capacities serve not just artistic development but whole person growth. On difficult days, when inspiration feels distant or rejection letters accumulate, I still sometimes hear my father's voice, "You're the most useless child we have." But now, instead of pain, I feel something closer to compassion, for my younger self who absorbed that judgment, for my parents whose narrow vision limited their ability to appreciate difference, and for anyone whose gift has been dismissed as worthless by those unable to recognize its value. Each morning, I enter my sunlit studio and face blank canvases with the hard-earned knowledge that I alone determine my worth. Creating from this place of inner authority produces work that resonates more deeply with viewers. Art that speaks to the universal human experience of seeking validation while learning to validate oneself. So what happens when someone calls you useless? You might surprise yourself. The very quality they dismiss might contain your greatest gift. The path they can't value might lead to your most meaningful purpose. Sometimes the worst thing someone can say becomes the catalyst for the best possible outcome, not because they were right, but because their judgment forced you to discover just how wrong they were. Have you ever had someone underestimate your abilities or dismiss your dreams? How did you respond? Did you let their judgment define you, or did it motivate you to prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Remember that sometimes the people who believe in you least create the opportunity for you to believe in yourself most. Thank you for listening.